Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. I'm so thrilled today to be joined by the fantastic team behind the movie The Sleepless. We have the writer and director, Michael DiBiasio Ornelas, and we have Nyambi Nyambi, who plays Zach in the film. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us. And Michael, I wanted to start by asking you a little bit about the genesis of this film, because it sounds like a lot of it came from your own time spent walking around your neighborhood in the middle of the night. And so I was interested in just how that immersive experience of doing that then transcended into the way that you wrote this script and the journey that you wanted to take these two characters on.
Yeah, I'm gonna pre-apologize. My daughter might be screaming in the other room.
Future star.
She has an open throat chakra, we've been told.
The world we live in now, I love it.
Yeah, so as you noted, the genesis of the film in terms of like the seed of the idea came to me when I was having a sleepless night myself. And I went for a walk to get a cup of coffee because we were out. And I was just, on that particular morning, it just really struck me how beautiful it was kind of out in the quiet of the city. There were a few people out and just kind of looking at them and seeing what they were doing. And then it just kind of like struck me like, what if, with a bit of a romantic context, what if two people met under these circumstances, and what if they took a chance on one another? And then from there, I got my coffee, I went home, and I started writing, and things kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah. And then Nyambi, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your character development and the way that you worked with a lot of the text, because it's a very dialogue driven film. And the majority of it for you as a performer is a two-hander with Rebecca. And so how was that a different process in the way that you were working with the text and developing this character?
Well, a lot of it had to be trust. It's very daunting to be, to see all of that text on a page. And the most important thing was to like, all right, what's the point? What am I like? What's the thing I believe in? What's my perspective? And then in working on the material, oddly enough, when doing a film like The Sleepless, you need to get as much sleep as possible. And and so I found nights I was like, oh, I'm doing The Sleepless, hey, I'm gonna cram and I don't need sleep because hey, this character didn't sleep either, And then and then I come in the next day, I'm like, man, I didn't get any sleep. Let me try, trying to remember these lines. But then those days where I was like, you know what, sleep, trust. Then those were the days that were so playful. So I learned a lot from this process. But like both were valid, both were great, but ultimately it was just about fully understanding what the perspective was, what Michael's perspective was, because a lot of that is from his brain, right? All of it is from his brain, and just fully believing in it, and gifting it to Rebecca, and hoping that I have someone who will, or I should say, gifting it to Sophia, and hoping that I have someone that won't run away when they hear my thoughts. So.
And with that mention there, if your character's sleeplessness, the two leads in this film are both people who struggle to sleep in the middle of the night. And so I wanted to ask both of you, for you, Michael, in the construction of these characters, and for you, Nyambi, in playing one of them, how you really thought about the emotional and psychological space that takes you to. Because if you really struggle to sleep for weeks, months, years on end, Nyambi, your character, I believe, says that he's been struggling with this for a couple of years, and it's gotten bad enough that he's seeing someone. How with both of these characters, you thought about the emotional state that would place them in?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think we meet both of them as is established in the early scenes at a time where they're performing a bit of a balancing act. Like you can tell by like they're still trying. They're trying to get to sleep. We still try, but they've also sort of like unfortunately have gotten a little bit experienced in where the line is in terms of, when to give up and just start your day. And they talk about that. And so I think that, like, we're dealing with two people here who, kind of, even going back to what Nyambi was saying with his preparation and his performance, like, these are people that know that they're not operating at 100%, but they're thoughtful, intelligent, sensitive people, maybe even therefore kind of feeling a little raw at this time of day and in life. And what we tried to do, even going back to your first question in terms of like what's going on with the film overall, is to ask the question, like, well, what if two people who so understand where the other is coming from that place, like, what if they just started talking about what they're experiencing, from their own angles, and with all the different factors that may go into their personal alchemical mix of insomnia, and then from there, try to kind of like together repossess their humanity, because like part of my personal experience is like, when it's really bad, when it's like 4 a.m. and like you just want to sleep, it's just you're kind of buzzing, and you feel like primal, and that can be a place for some wild thoughts, or maybe some interesting conversation, especially when you add some caffeine into the mix. But it's I don't think either of these characters want to stay in that place, and I hope that anyone who watches who might be experiencing something similar can at least see one path towards a little bit more solace, if not improvement or redemption in that area through connection.
And was that how you were thinking about it in terms of your character, Nyambi?
Yeah, I mean, we spoke on a lot of that. In fact, all of that. I think the thing that, at least for me personally, because I've had a lot of sleepless nights, to where, I mean, literally I can't like I mean, I don't take medication or anything like that to do it. Whatever, I won't do like what is it? I don't even know the names of those things, but in terms of like the tea that has the stuff, that make, like, I won't take sleep. I won't do it. And yet there are those nights where I'm like, I want to go to sleep. I am laying there trying to actively go to sleep. I've closed my eyes to go to sleep. Yet I cannot. It's like, it's 6 a.m. and I still cannot, because my brain is just still like thinking about, it's almost as though I've spent the day trying to be heard and I haven't been heard. And I'm like trying to suss that out in some way. And so, I mean, that's the way, at least for me, when I haven't been able to sleep, which have been many times, it's usually a day where I felt like there's something that I'm not being heard on, but something deep. And I feel like with this, I worked with that, and I felt like with this was like the most important thing, and we've talked about this, was listening, and giving space to the other person to listen, but finding that the other person is actually giving you space to hear you, and ultimately, feeling like you're being heard. And that's why it allows also this diarrhea of dialogue to come out, because that's what happens we have no filter when you're not able to, like, there's no filter. Like, you just, I'm just, it's like the Austin Powers moment, where it's like, when he says, my God, Vanessa has a fabulous body. I bet she shines like a minx. How do I tell her that? Because of the unfreezing process, I have no inner monologue. It's like, how do I tell her because I haven't slept? You're gonna hear everything. And that's kind of what I felt like this experience was.
I love it. And then, Michael, I wanted to ask you about the logistical and narrative challenge of overcoming the elephant in the room once you conceptualize the idea of these two characters who meet at a bodega in the middle of the night, because you then have to figure out structurally, how do I make the female character feel safe going on a walk in the dark with a man that she just met on the street that she has no prior relationship with. And I think that you really successfully address that. You have a lot of little things where, you know, she takes his information, his name, she takes his picture, she sends it to her friends so that somebody knows where she is. And so I just wanted to ask you about the challenges of making sure that you address that within the narrative structure for your characters.
Yeah, it wasn't a challenge so much as it's just it was just the right thing to do. You know, like both in terms of advocating for, you know, this being fine, but also leaving room for the fact that, you know, a woman in this situation is, you know, has to have certain things on her mind. And I think that, like, you know, I think it would have been a different situation if they didn't meet at the bodega, and if Ajay Naidu's character Vivek didn't know both of them. You know, I think for both of the characters, he maybe was trying to make a little, not maybe, but he's trying to make a little match. It's clear. But I think, and she's, you know, she says that, and also, like, you know, I think that, like, you know, I think we talked about this in rehearsal as well. It's just from the man's point of view, from Nyambi's point of view, from my point of view as the writer. It's like these are the sort of things that we need to be thinking about, and we need to be modeling, such that, like, to hold space for the fact that, like, it's acceptable, if not correct, for her to be careful in these situations, but that we can make room for that and still show interest in a way that is respectful and open-ended.
Yeah. And then, Nyambi, I wanted to ask you about the development of intimacy between your two characters as they get to know each other throughout the course of the evening and the course of the night. And even just like the little minute ways that you would think about how they would be walking next to each other, maybe a little bit closer as they get to know each other. You know, when they by the time they sit down in the coffee shop, they're kind of leaning in. And even when they have moments where they have disagreements, it's at a point where they've developed enough of a rapport that it's still coming from a place of connectivity. And so I was really interested in how you and Rebecca worked to form that and thought about different ways that you could express this growing intimacy without it being necessarily any sort of traditional kind of like they hug, they hold hands at any point either.
Yeah. I think, well, at least for me, there wasn't an agenda of what, like, I want to somehow find a way to sleep with this person. There was the whole agenda was really about, I just want to connect with someone, like anyone. I just want to, and we were able to connect, like, and find trust in one another as the morning came. It was almost a trust exercise, and so that with each passing hour, whether it be how we lean into each other, or a look, it's trusting and trusting and trusting. And also, again, and maybe that's because this is how I am. I'm not pushy, someone who will give space and say, I'll let the night be what the night is. And if this is what it is and this is it, this is fine. This is great. This is amazing. It doesn't have to be any more than this. It doesn't have to be any more than what you want it to be. And that's kind of how I felt like that the process was. So then any permission given was or granted was came from her. And also it helped that we also had, Rebecca and I had history in terms of that we knew each other way back when from our school days. So, like, there was familiarity in terms of saying, "Oh, hey, Stella Adler. Oh, hey, how you doing?" Like that, And so I think that that already was an icebreaker, and then so we were able to just play, just trust each other, and just take our time with it within the limited time that we had.
Yeah. And similarly to that point, Michael, I was interested in a lot of the choices that you made directorially, particularly in terms of thinking about camera placement and camera movement, in the fact that you're working throughout the film to frame these two characters, but you really use the camera to reflect the evolution of the dynamic between them. And so I was interested in the journey and the process of figuring out what those camera shots, what those tracking shots were going to be throughout the film to really represent that.
Oh, good question. I try not to move the camera or to do anything with the camera that doesn't come from a choice of character. So in terms of like, specific frames and how they might change, and when we do move the camera over time, I'm always thinking about it from the point of view of like, where are we, the audience, in relation to what's going on with Zach individually, Sophia individually, and then as they come together, them together. And then within a scene, all three of those things can be at play. And a fourth that I would add would be the city, because that's all contained in the city, is all contained in the street. Maybe even you could say the time of day. It's a little bit more abstract, but that would be a part of it too. But beyond that, I try to do the same thing that I would try to do when scripting, which is to get my conscious brain as much out of the equation as possible and lead with the subconscious. So like by instinct, what feels right. And I think I've gotten better at that as I've let the process go on longer. We also tend to produce hyper locally. So when we're out there in the field shooting, I had been walking those streets knowing that I was going to be shooting scenes in certain areas for days and weeks on end. So I kind of get to do a little bit of experimentation with pre-visualization. And then of course there were meetings and discussion with our DP. But it's like, what does the character want right now? What do the two characters in their relationship want right now? What does this particular location have to offer? How are all those things kind of commingling with one another, such that what we're presenting feels the most real to the experience of what's happening in this moment, knowing that it's a film and not real life. So.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on everything with the film. I slept terribly after watching it, but I don't blame the movie. I blame all the sounds of the working construction. But it was a very immersive experience. So congratulations on everything. And thank you so much for this conversation today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.